On October 5th, at Dana Health Education Center, local physicians gathered for a lecture. The speaker was Dr. Ira Helfand, an ER doctor and the co-founder of Physicians for Social Responsibility. His subject was nuclear war.
I want to talk to people tonight about the current state of danger posed by nuclear weapons. Since the end of the Cold War, there's been a real complacency about nuclear weapons and a tendency to act as though the danger of nuclear war ended when the Cold War ended, as indeed it should have. The weapons were built to fight the Cold War, and there really is no reason to have them anymore. But we do. They didn't go away. There are tens of thousands of them in the world, and perhaps most dangerously, 1,000 in the US arsenal and 1,000 in the Russian arsenal are maintained on hair-trigger alert. They sit on missiles that can be launched in 15 minutes. They can destroy cities in the other country in another 30 minutes after that. And this is an enormous danger which continues to threaten the health and well-being of people all around the world.
In his lecture, Dr. Helfand illustrated the medical consequences of a nuclear attack on America.
In a metropolitan area the size of Boston, which is the one that I've studied the most, 1 million people would die instantly. Another 1 million people would suffer injuries from which they could not recover no matter what kind of medical care they got. Another 1 million people would suffer very serious injuries from which they might recover if intensive medical care were available. And about 100,000 people might survive on the fringes of the firestorm with lesser injuries. Of course, the 1 million people, the 2 million people who are injured would not receive any medical care to speak of at all.
People have tended to assume that in the past, if there was a nuclear war, somehow or other we'd muddle through this and we'd all get patched up and go on somewhat as before. And one of the real responsibilities of physicians is to make it totally clear that in the event of nuclear war, there's nothing that the medical profession can do to alleviate the suffering that will be caused, because the skill will be just too vast. We've taken to referring to this as the final epidemic.
The entire infrastructure on which we depend to live, the economic infrastructure, the transportation, the communication, it would all be destroyed. The vast majority of us would die in the coming months from starvation and exposure.
Our core message is that something like this, which is not in any way subject to treatment, needs to be prevented. And so as physicians, we feel a special responsibility to advise our patients, the world, that nuclear war is not something that we can survive, and that it is something which we must prevent. The Non-Proliferation Treaty comes up for review in April of 2010. It's a treaty signed in the late 60s, which committed those countries which signed it, which did not have nuclear weapons, to not developing them. It has been the cornerstone of our effort to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons to other countries. The document also calls on nations which do have nuclear weapons to negotiate in good faith to eliminate those arsenals, and it calls specifically on them to stop testing nuclear weapons. And the United States and the other nuclear powers have not lived up to our end of the bargain.
At this point, you need 67 votes in the Senate to get this treaty ratified. There are 60 Democrats who have all indicated they will vote for it. We need 7 Republicans rather. There's no way you get those 7 Republicans without getting both senators from Maine. As one of the editors today said, Maine has the 2 most powerful senators in the world. And it is terribly important that both of these senators sign on to this treaty. It would be a great act of statesmanship on their part if they did it now.
Oh, there's a great deal that people can do about it, and that's why we talk about it. We live at an extraordinarily dangerous moment, perhaps the most dangerous moment in human history. But on the other hand, we also live at an incredibly hopeful moment when, for the first time, really, in the nuclear era, we have a U.S. administration that is actually committed to the abolition of nuclear weapons. And I think there's going to be a tremendous struggle between the president and those who support his agenda on the one hand, and those who mistakenly cling to the idea that nuclear weapons make us more secure on the other hand. And in this struggle, there's going to be an enormous role for the public to play. And if there was ever a time for average citizens to concern themselves with the nuclear question, this is it. Because we literally have the opportunity to put this problem behind us once and for all.
For Community Update, I'm Pat Gill.